Hey everyone, I'm on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love your help to get there. If you're enjoying the content, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and join the family.
It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, and somehow that made it hit even harder. When Kyle Busch finally reacted to NASCAR's latest decision, there was no outrage, no dramatic pause, no headline-ready rant, just a few quiet words that didn't sound like much until you actually listened. Because what he said didn't feel like a reaction, it felt like a warning. And the deeper you look into it, the clearer it becomes. This was never just about one driver getting a chance. It started with a moment that almost slipped past unnoticed. A simple question, a simple answer. Good for him. That's how Kyle Busch responded when asked about Cleetus McFarland stepping toward a NASCAR Xfinity ride. On the surface, it sounded supportive, respectful even, but the tone didn't match the words. There was something underneath it, something restrained. And as he kept talking, that restraint slowly peeled back, not into anger, but into something far more uncomfortable. Honesty, the kind that doesn't shout but lingers, the kind that makes people in the room shift in their seats, because suddenly this wasn't about approval anymore. It was about doubt, and that doubt didn't come from nowhere. To understand why this moment felt so different, you have to look at who Cleetus McFarland really is, not just the name, but the force behind it. Garrett Mitchell didn't come up through the traditional racing ladder. He built his empire online. Millions of subscribers, viral car builds, burnouts that turn into events, a personality that feels raw, loud, and completely authentic. He owns his own track, the Freedom Factory, and commands an audience most drivers could only dream of. And that audience, it doesn't just watch, it follows, it shows up, it engages. That kind of reach is exactly what NASCAR has been chasing for years. Not just fans, but a new generation of fans. People who didn't grow up glued to Sunday broadcasts, but grew up watching cars on YouTube instead. So when news broke that Cleetus was approved, pending a test, to run an Xfinity race at Rockingham, it made sense. From a business perspective, it made perfect sense. But racing has never been just business, and that's where everything starts to get complicated. Because while fans online saw opportunity, inside the garage, the reaction felt different, quieter, more cautious. And when Kyle Busch continued speaking, he shifted the entire conversation with one line that no one could ignore. He didn't yell it, he didn't emphasize it, he just said it. He pointed out that drivers like Denny Hamlin ran thousands of races before getting here. Then he added something that cut even deeper. His own 10-year-old son might have more race experience than Cleetus. Let that sink in. A kid, more laps, more time behind the wheel in real racing conditions than someone potentially stepping into one of NASCAR's biggest stages. That wasn't just a comparison. It was a question disguised as a statement. What exactly qualifies someone now? Because for decades, the answer was clear. There was a path. You didn't skip steps. You didn't jump the line. You started small, learned the craft, made mistakes, fixed them, and slowly climbed. Short tracks, late models, regional circuits, hundreds of races, thousands of laps, years of proving you belonged. That's how drivers like Busch earned their place. That's how almost everyone in that garage did. But now, that path doesn't feel as solid as it used to, because suddenly, another factor has entered the equation. Not just how fast you are, but how many people are watching you. And that shift changes everything. NASCAR does have an approval process. It exists for a reason. This isn't just driving fast in a straight line. This is chaos at 150 miles per hour. Cars inches apart, split-second decisions. One mistake doesn't just affect you, it can wipe out half the field. That level of precision isn't something you casually step into, and Kyle made that clear without needing to over-explain it. He talked about simulators, how they're helpful but limited, tools, not replacements. He talked about his own early days, when rookies had actual track tests, real opportunities to learn under controlled conditions. That system doesn't exist the same way anymore, and that's where the concern quietly creeps in, because if the preparation has changed, then what's replacing it? And that question didn't just stay with Kyle. Others in the garage didn't come out swinging, but their words carried weight in a different way. Jesse Love, one of the younger drivers rising through the ranks, took a softer approach. He didn't criticize the decision outright. Instead, he pointed toward preparation. He talked about using team resources, simulators, engineers, the tools available to someone stepping into that level. On paper, it sounded supportive, helpful even. But if you listen closely, it felt more like a subtle warning, because what he was really saying was simple. This isn't something you can just show up and do. This isn't content. This isn't a video. This is survival. And that's where the pressure shifts entirely, because now this isn't just about whether Cleetus deserves the opportunity. It's about what he does with it. If he treats this like just another piece of content, every criticism instantly becomes valid. Every doubt becomes a reality. But if he approaches this differently, if he puts in the work, respects the level, learns fast, then this could become something else entirely. Not a shortcut, but a new kind of path. And that's where things get even more complicated, because this situation isn't as new as it feels. Motorsports across the world have been slowly moving in this direction. Big audiences, big personalities, crossover appeal. It works. It brings attention, money, and growth. But it also brings tension, because every time a move like this happens, there's an unspoken trade being made. Growth in exchange for tradition. Exposure in exchange for process. And for the drivers who spent years grinding through the system, that trade doesn't always feel fair. These are people who chased funding just to stay alive in the sport, who traveled track to track, slept in trucks, raced anything they could just to get noticed. They didn't have shortcuts. They didn't have massive platforms backing them. And now, suddenly, it looks like maybe shortcuts exist after all. That's the part that sits heavy, because this was never about blaming Cleetus McFarland. Not really. He didn't create this system. He didn't rewrite the rules. He saw an opportunity and he took it, just like anyone would. The real spotlight isn't on him. It's on NASCAR, on their decisions, their standards, their direction. Because if experience and safety are supposed to be the foundation of the sport, then where exactly is the line now? How much experience is enough? How much risk is acceptable? And maybe the biggest question of all, who gets to decide? Right now, all of that leads to one moment, one test, Rockingham. That's where everything becomes real, because until then, this is all conversation, debate, speculation. But once the car hits the track, there's no hiding. If he performs, if he proves he belongs, then this entire narrative flips. What looked like a shortcut suddenly looks like evolution, a new way forward, a different kind of driver entering the sport. But if it doesn't go that way, if things fall apart, if the gap shows, then this becomes something much bigger than one race. It becomes a turning point, the moment people look back on and say, that's when things started to change. And maybe that's why Kyle Busch didn't need to raise his voice, because sometimes the quietest reactions carry the most weight. When someone with his experience looks at a situation and simply says it doesn't sit right, that's not drama, that's perspective. That's years of understanding what this sport demands and what happens when those demands start to shift. Whether NASCAR listens to that or not, that's still unclear. But now the conversation doesn't belong to them alone, because this sport has always been shaped by the people watching it, the fans who decide what matters, what feels right, and what crosses the line. So now it comes down to something simple but uncomfortable. Is this the future of racing? New faces, new audiences, new paths to the track? Or is this the moment where the rules start bending just a little too far? And if they are, how long before they don't bend anymore?